Okay, Dr. Nichols-Boyle, here we go again. So for this last part, I'm going to talk about the imagery that was depicted of Ireland and Irish people during this kind of time after immigration and the sort of things that stereotypes and ways that the Irish people were seen. And it gives you a better sense, I think, of what our authors were dealing with. And in the case of Carleton, maybe what he was writing against and trying to kind of refute, um, and maybe some of the English authors as well, but some of the ideas and stereotypes that may have been in their heads because of this. I'm going to save the final, more modern part for when we get to readings that are a little bit more modern and lead up to independence. So we'll talk more about that as we get to those readings from that time period. So this is here as a statue, just to kind of give you an idea of a positive Irish fiction today. This is a statue of Daniel O'Connell, who I just mentioned in the last video, and this is on O'Connell Street, the biggest street in Ireland, um, in Dublin, and it's huge. There's 4 lanes of traffic there, and this is kind of in the middle, maybe 6 lanes of traffic. I'm not sure exactly. And you can get a sense of the scale of this as Daniel O'Connell from the size of the people down here, and seeing how he's celebrated in this way, and called the liberator, as I may have mentioned before. So this is something you would almost always see people say, "I'll meet you on O'Connell Street at the O'Connell statue," and everyone would kind of say around here it's a great congregating place in Ireland for getting into the downtown sort of area. But the image of Ireland in the mid 1800s was quite different. So I'm going to show you a few different things and kind of go through them. You can also find these in that Irish History and Geography section. So first of all, this one is a sketch, this John Leech sketch from Punch. So it's kind of a cartoon. Punch was a magazine, often political, English magazine, that would often poke fun at the politics of the day, particularly the Irish. So this one is titled An Irish Hotel. And I'll do my best and worst Irish and English accent here. So here's the Irish maid here, chambermaid. So she was responsible for like cleaning up the bedrooms and things like that. And here's the English traveler talking to her. And this is published in 1846. So here we have the traveler, the English traveler, saying, "Hello, what the deuce are you about with that gridiron?" And the chambermaid says, "To be sure, it's your honour's bed I'm warming, and ain't our warming pan engaged frying sausages." And yeah, I can tell you're not laughing, but this would have been hilarious at the time, and I have to explain why maybe. So what she's holding here is a gridiron. So this is what you would kind of put food on and hold over the fire to cook food, right? But in the warming pan would have been quite similar, except for it would be more like a shovel, like it wouldn't have the grill marks kind of thing. And the warming pan, what you would use that for is you would warm up bricks. They have the hot water bottle now, something similar. So you would warm up bricks in the fire, and you would pull them out with this warming pan, and then you would take those hot bricks and shove them under the bed in order to keep it warm. Because remember, they don't have central heating, right? And you might only have a fireplace in the main bedroom, or the main room. And even if you did maybe have a small fireplace in the bedroom, it's not going to give off that much heat. So that was to keep people warm. So she has confused. So he's asking her, "Why are you using the gridiron here?" And she said, "Well, because the warming pan I'm using to fry sausages, obviously." So it's depicting the Irish as stupid, as idiots, right? Why wouldn't you just switch the two, right? Why wouldn't you be using the gridiron for what it's supposed to be used, frying sausages, and use a warming pan for warming the bed with the bricks? So that's the kind of typical sort of slight little thing at Irish intelligence that you might see along the way. Okay, so that's one of them. And I'm having a hard time getting out of this now. That's fun. Okay, let me see if I can find a way to quit this. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so we'll go back to then seeing some other things here. And this is the also in here. This comes from these explanation, although not all the images. It comes from Michael O'Malley, who's Associate Professor of History and Art History at George Mason University. And he's talking about cartoons and images and depictions of Irish immigrants when they came to America. And much of these were also being circulated throughout England, as we see in that kind of punch cartoon type idea as well. So you can see this is in this first one, showing the Irish as being racially different, even though the Irish and the English would look pretty much identical. Except for maybe if they're different social class, the way that they're dressing. But facial features and all that, they would look differently. But they were depicted as being more ape-like or simian. So in this cartoon, it makes this kind of accent, and it makes their contrast explicit. So you have the chimp, the ape here, and then you have the Irishman looking at him, and it says, mutual, both at the same time soliloquizing, and it's glad I am that there's bars. Right, so we can understand why the Irishman would be happy there's bars. I mean, this is a wild animal. He doesn't want to attack him. But the wild animal is thinking the same thing of the Irishman, right? This idea that there's he's just the same. He's also a wild animal. And you can see his facial features are mimicking the same as the ape here, as the chimp. So in the mid-1800s, you're just starting to get people considering the theory of evolution and using it in ways to support their own prejudices and themselves as the more superior race. And one of the things that they were arguing was that facial angle was a sign of intelligence and culture. So we get this kind of image here, and you can see the closer it is to being more straight. This is sort of and of course Hitler used this kind of things too, the Aryan, the white European. And then the closer it gets to being more animal-like or having more bigger features, then that is the less evolved. So as you evolve more, that changes. And of course, that's ridiculous, but this is the kind of thing that they argued at the time. And inevitably, whoever was writing it was on this end of it. And when they studied the physiognomy or the facial structure of Irishmen, measuring their head size and the distance from your nose and this kind of thing, they detected animalistic qualities, of course. And this is an example of a book that had more of that comparative physiognomy, and it would talk not just about the facial features, but also the characteristics and how they resembled animals. So this is James Fairfield's 1852 book, Comparative Physiognomy, or Resemblances Between Men and Animals. And one of the people they depicted in that, one of the races of cultures, was the Irish. And I'll read it kind of out to you so you can follow along. You can see how in this case they're comparing the Irish to a dog. That subject is the resemblance between the Irishman and the dog, and the eloquence which we crave without knowing exactly what we're waiting for is Irish eloquence. This is so prominent a trait of the Irish character that if the resemblances alluded to exist, it must be characteristic of the dog. And in the next one it says, has a picture again of the Irishman with the dog, and it says, he's saying, Ira, come on now, I'm ready for ye. And ye would be the plural of you in the Irish language. Ye or yous, they'd still say that. And it's as plainly expressed in the attitude of this Irishman as it is in that of the dog. And it's perfectly natural to both, and instinctual, not something cultivated, but this is the way they are. But the attitude indicates more the posture of affairs inside than is expressed in words. There is a provisional clause in the defiance which, if it were written, would read thus: if you are not too strong for me. The cowardly disposition exhibited in the manner of looking, of standing, and of grasping the shillelagh is not to be mistaken, and it is in the attempt to look and to feel courageous that it is most betrayed. If Paddy were not a coward, he would not arm himself with a club as a preparation for successful resistance, much less would he use this cruel instrument to attack with. Cowardice and cruelty are inseparable, and the proof of the one is proof of the other. The cause which operates to produce these two traits, as explained in the chapter concerning the vulture, is brought to bear powerfully upon the Irishman, who drinks to drive away the feeling, and then they go on to his other negative characteristics like drinking and fighting in more detail. So this, what he's hearing here, is sometimes called a cudgel or a shillelagh. They spell it a little bit differently here than you might have seen it, but this would be something you made, a club you made out of wood that you would fight people with. Didn't have a lot of other weapons. It was fairly common. If you really wanted to get somebody, you would make what you call like a brick bat, which is that you would nail some nails into the end of it and get people with that. So this is true, but again, the idea that this is instinctual, this is natural, that it's animalistic and dog-like is of course showing the kind of prejudice in the way they're trying to justify what they see as their superiority and the inferiority of the Irish. Um, and of course, that cowardice and cruelty. So that's the way the Irish are seen. And here's another cartoon which contrasts Florence Nightingale, the Civil War nurse, with who they're calling Bridget McBruiser, the stereotypical Irish woman. And it has contrasted faces. Look on this picture and then on that. And Shakespeare saying this here, right? And again, of course, what do we see here? What are the differences between the two? Well, she, of course, is not dressed as nicely. She looks kind of dirty and disheveled, and Florence Nightingale's all nicely put together with her hair and her dress and her jewelry. But also the face, again, it looks very similar to that face we saw above, much more ape-like, simian, like these kind of natural animalistic features as compared to Florence Nightingale. And of course, not what Irish people really looked like at the time. So the idea of this is we often see these kinds of caricatures of immigrants. We saw African Americans compared to apes as well. So Germans, they stereotyped in beer halls, Chinese immigrants mocked in caricatures in cartoons. A lot of similarity with the way African Americans, as I said, and Irish were depicted. But the strangeness of this, in a way, is that, again, the Irish are seen so differently here as a result of they're depicted so differently here as a result of the way that they're thought about. So today, again, you would see no difference in the way an Irish person looks and an English person, or an American or whatever, and nobody thinks of them as being not white or racially primitive in some way. And sometimes people think of them as being kind of hyper white, and it goes to show you how much the perception and the history and the mindset influences the imagery as well. And this is the kind of thing that Carleton and the other authors, that Bell, that we've read so far and that we will continue to read, this is the images and the attitude that they were facing in writing at that time period.